I think maybe Kara turned a dumb question into a good answer there. So what if the what is the perspective that people are missing? What other information? What other sentiment? I'm not sure what the word is, but if people think that the trans community has taken off and it's all been roses just in the last couple of years, I don't know. What are some other misconceptions? What are maybe the mainstream things that we're not talking about? You turned a dumb question into a good answer once before. I'm not asking you to do it twice. I guess what I'm saying is, if that's maybe a little bit of a clueless perspective, are there other clueless perspectives that you encounter? And that opened up to the entire table.
Well, I think one of the dynamics that we've seen is that, especially for the trans community, they've been oftentimes invisible and in the background. When the 80s and we had the HIV/AIDS scare that sort of wiped through the gay male populace, you saw the trans community become invisible during that process. Yet you have incredibly high rates of HIV within the community. And in the mid to late 90s, you started to see these computer groups pop up, and people identified with one another as a way to connect, because there were oftentimes not ways for people to necessarily connect in person. And now you've seen this growth in the trans community to become allied, work together. You see groups like Metro Trans Umbrella Group happening not just here, but around the country, in all of our major cities around the state, Columbia, Springfield, Joplin, Kansas City. We have other groups like Metro Trans Umbrella Group. And they're advocating and they're putting a face to the issue. I think that's number one. That's one of the biggest challenges we have. Having people out front, like Kara, who will talk and tell their personal stories.
Exactly. Yeah, and I do think the media has I mean, we sort of wait for those voices to come out, and then we are more comfortable talking about it, because I think, speaking as a mainstream media person, we were okay with the L and the G, and we would throw the B in for good measure because it didn't seem to really offend that many people. But the T, we were like, wait a minute, you know, and then you would have to go to your editors and try to explain what that was, and then they're like, so there weren't a lot of stories to tell, and it was hard to tell because we weren't able to find MTUG and organizations like that who were out there speaking eloquently about it and not afraid to talk to reporters who stumble and ask dumb questions. And because part of our job as reporters to become educated on a topic so that we can then convey that information. And we're seeing much more of that. So I think that's why that trajectory might be, it looks like they're just because they're getting a lot more media. I don't know that they're, the statistics that you quoted are evidence that there's still huge problems and still great disparity in that one population. So.
Do you see that? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to add, the point on visibility is great, and I think those statistics are perfect, is that the trans community, a lot of times, as unfortunate as it may be, our goal is to blend back into society so that we maybe won't be victims of these crimes and just become another statistic. And so yes, it is taking people now starting to have the courage to stand up and be vocal. People like Caitlin and Laverne Cox and Janet Mock, and all these people that are willing to stand up and have their voices heard.
Those statistics alone sound like a pretty mainstream story. What kind of column length could you get on something like that?
Well, I could stick up to the paper right now and say, I mean, they have been, you know, the fact that they devoted a specialty beat and allow me to cover the LGBT community quite extensively and prominently placed in the paper. I think any time that I can convey that this is an issue, that's a serious issue, that's affecting a lot of people, and more importantly, that the most of our readers don't know about it, it's an opportunity for us. So we get a lot of ink out of that, I think.
It could be easy to surmise that this might just be preaching to the choir of the core of the St. Louis area, and the state is obviously much larger than that, and the opinions are much more diverse than what you might find in the central corridor of our city. Where do you place the value of reaching a broader audience with the issues you're discussing tonight, with the statistics that you brought up that seem like a lot of people might be impacted by? What's the value of that broader reach?
I think there's value in preaching to the choir, because the choir has family and friends, and especially now with social networking, you see more and more people getting to these conversations with their family and their friends that might be from outside of St. Louis in an area that's not as tolerant, having these conversations and broadening horizons, opening minds to the possibility that, you know, maybe we are all the same and maybe I just need to let people live.
I think one of the interesting dynamics I've seen that Doug touched on a little bit and Adria talked about is intersectionality. You've got so many different stories within the LGBT community that the stories that Doug is reporting on, you're talking about race, you're talking about gender. These are bigger, broader issues that encompass many populations around our region. And we're clear that we have a lot of challenges around those same issues. For the LGBT community, we're not immune to that. Are there racists within the LGBT community? Sadly, yes. Are there people that don't understand the trans issue? Yes, completely. But we're forced to have those dialogues and have more of those conversations than you necessarily see in the broader population.
Doug, AJ, Adria, Kara, thank you all for your time. I appreciate you being here.